Hi, I'm Gary Gruber, and I want to mention to you that the main way to do well on the SAT, or for that matter any exam, is not to worry about getting into getting into the just the answer. You're trying to rush into the answer. Try to extract something from the problem that leads you to the next step, which then gets you to the answer. And then that'll get you the answer. In other words, the process is the critical thing. And, Einstein even said that he was disappointed when he got the answer because the whole process was lost. He just got the answer. So the idea is you want to get something, look at something in the problem that maybe even arouses your curiosity. Like if you see a word, example like mercurial, and you say, "Oh, I don't know what that word means," and you say, "Wait a minute, but mercury is something it's an element that goes fast, it moves fast, right? It's like a substance that goes fast, like in a thermometer." So think of it that way. That maybe that's what the word means, and maybe that's in the context that's what you want to use. That's one of the things. Let me maybe I should do something with an example. Show an example that gives you that idea of the process. Let's do this example. Oh, by the way, I ought to tell you that the beautiful thing about uh, uh, getting into the process is that you start enjoying the process, and your anxiety is greatly reduced because you're looking more on like the enjoyment of going from one step to another and accomplishing something as you're doing that. Here's an interesting example. Oh, and I want to mention this. You have to use strategies, of course, and that's what we're here for. Strategies to enable you to go through the process. And interestingly enough, these strategies you can almost memorize. In other words, you don't have to sort of like if you're facing in front of an audience and you're worried about what they're thinking or what they're going to say. Uh, you want to not have to think, rack your brains. So you can take a strategy and actually memorize the strategy. Let me give you an example of that. This is actually a very good example. What percent of 5 is 20? And you see, oh my God, I say 5%. What do I do? Put the years over the ofs over the years. What do I do? Just every time that you see a of, let's see if we have here this year. By the way, it's the 2002 guide. Let me just get this like this. Okay, every time you translate the what to the x, the percent to the slash over 100, the of to the times, and the is to and equals. So this then would become, see what happens there? The what becomes the x, the percent becomes the slash over 100, the of becomes the times, the 5 becomes the 5, is becomes an equals, 20 becomes the 20, almost without even thinking. But it's still a strategy. And then you use another strategy. You multiply both sides of the equation by 100. I know this is hard to see because we don't have it like all in one slide. And you get x equals 400. But the idea is by translating that, you get you get the answer that way. I'll answer the questions in a minute. Let me just go on to another strategy. Yeah, we'll do example 2. I just want to show you the essence of the strategies first. All right, suppose you have something like this, and you want to find out what x is. In other words, the question would be: you're given this figure. What is the value of x? Now, one very important strategy is, you remember when you took geometry and the teacher said two sides of a triangle are equal, I drop a perpendicular line down, and I prove that the base angles are equal. The teacher should say, maybe they do now, I don't know, but the teacher should say, the reason why we drop a perpendicular line down is because every time we draw a line, or draw something in a diagram, we get more information out of it. And if we draw something symmetrical, like a straight line down to break things equally, we get equal things out of it. So it's very important to, if you have a diagram, do something with that diagram. Draw a line down. So drawing extra lines. Okay, that's a strategy. So let's see what I would get here. I draw that line down, and then when I draw that line down, I can see that I get a 4 there and I get a 3 there. I know I may be going this over fast, and it's hard to do this on a screen like this, but I get that. So now I have a 3, 4, and a 5, and next is 5. A 3, 4, 5 triangle, or 3 squared plus 4 squared is 5 squared. You can do it with the Pythagorean theorem. Let me just quickly answer, and let me then go to the next example here. Let me answer this question from Sabrina. What do you think is the best way to study for the ACT? Well, essentially strategies. You need to use strategies. And I get hold of my book, my ACT book, which was on the, let me go back to that. The one that the ACT Guide 2014. That would probably be using that book, and there's a study program that's you can use in that. I have that described in how to use how to use the book. And with the strategies, that's important to learn the strategies and then kind of internalize them. Use them in many other questions, and that's, of course, you can take the practice test. And the practice test is a key to the strategies also. So if you miss something in a question on the test, you can look at the strategies for that. So that would be something that I would certainly do, is get something. The best way to study is, of course, learn basic skills. That's like math basic skills, vocabulary. But in vocabulary, it would be more prefixes and roots. On the ACT, it's not much of a problem. The ACT, you have to realize, is much more memory oriented than the SAT. In other words, it requires you to know more in background rather than to think through a problem so much. Although you still have to think through problems. But so the math, now the math they're getting closer. The ACT is getting closer to the SAT in strategy. So in a sense, both are fairly alike in that sense. But I would definitely study for the ACT by going through the basic skills, then using strategies, and then using practice and doing practice. And when you practice a test and you get some question wrong on the test, make sure that you learn those strategies, those mistakes. Now, the ACT is disclosed certain times of the year. You can check that with the ACT organization. And the SAT is disclosed at certain times of the year. So you're going to take it for practice. I would take it those times of the year, and then when you get the exam back, see what you did wrong and see if you can use a strategy for doing those questions right. Let's go on to another example. Let's see. Should we do just wondering if we should do a math example. Yeah, let me just mention something. This occurs both on the ACT and the SAT. Sometimes they may give you a question where you're allowed to use a calculator, but it's faster not to use a calculator. Here's a perfect example. And I gotta mention this to you. I want you to, kind of like, I don't know whether maybe curiosity is the word. Get curious at something. You see something interesting in the problem, use that. Look, I have 2/3 times 3/4 times 4/5 times 5/6 times 6/7. Now, isn't that interesting? I have a 3 in the denominator, a 3 in the numerator, a 4 in the denominator, a 4 in the numerator. Why can't I just cancel those out? In other words, just take those, see what I mean? See what I'm doing? Just cancel the 3's out, the 4's out, the 5's out, and the 6's out. And what do I get? You get 2 7's. Watch for something curious again in a problem. If you can get, probably the key thing in taking any test is if you can extract something that arouses your curiosity, you say, gee, that's interesting. That's what, I mean, as a student, I used to even mark when the teacher sent me something. I would say right back to the teacher saying, I think you could have made this more interesting by doing this to allow the kid to get more curious. Of course, the teacher almost gave me detention when I, did something like that. Say, what a wise guy? What are you, a wise guy? Or a teacher would grade something, and I'd say, well, you could have noticed this thing in that, and that, you didn't pick that up. But I'm not saying you should do this. But by getting, I would call it an active approach. You know. Okay. Let's go on. I'd like to, before answering other questions, let me go on to another. Let me go on to let's see, maybe I'll do a verbal question. I have a lot of the math questions here. Oh, I ought to do this while we're on the math. Let me give you an example. This is a really interesting thing. Here's an example where just a handful of students got this question right. Let me let you just mull this over for a little while. So you have a kind of a triangle, and you want to figure out which is true. Now, there's two powerful strategies that you use in this question. Let's see what I'll give you. Just a all right. I hope that students had drawn that line, the line over there. See, if you drew a line below that triangle, that gives you a lot more information, and then you can now write down. I would write, and one other strategy is to label things. So I would label as A, B, and C, and now I have X, Y, and Z, and let me get the next one. I can just add or subtract equations. So I have these equations, and I just add, subtract them. This is all in my books, by the way, in the books that I have. Now let's go to the verbal. Suppose you have a sentence completion. This is essentially on the SAT now. Being a something person, he insisted at the conference when he spoke he was not interrupted. So you want to figure out what word that you put in there will give you this, will satisfy this sentence, with a blank. What kind of person would it be? One strategy is to try to figure out words that you would put in there. Being a very person that doesn't change their mind, would do something like this. So you could go through the choices and say a successful person wouldn't really do it. A delightful person wouldn't do it. Headstrong is very close to what I just mentioned before. So let's keep that there. An understanding person, solitary, headstrong would be the answer. So the strategy, watch for keywords. The main clause of the sentence, he insisted not interrupt, supports the idea expressed in the first three words of the sentence. So headstrong is the thing. Let's go to another example. Now this is a two blank strategy question. In spite of the something of her presentation, many people were something with the speaker's concepts and ideas. Now, how would you do that? Well, maybe you take the first word and let's think about that for a while. How would you do that? The strategy. Look for contrasts and oppositions. You see the in spite of? There's going to be a contrast. There's probably going to be an opposite in those two words. So there's going to have an opposite flavor in that. So what is the opposite flavor? Interest enthralled, that's not opposite. Power taken, that's not opposite. Intensity shocked, that's not opposite. Greatness gratified, that's not opposite. Strength and bored, that's an opposite. So that's how to do some of the verbal things. Let's see. Let's say you have a word like inextricable, and you want to figure out, what does that mean? Associations are a very important way to figure out the meaning of words. That's a main strategy in words. So I look at inextricable. In fact, you know where this came from? Somebody had called me and said, "What's the meaning of inextricable?" And for some reason, I just forgot. You freeze up sometimes. You just forgot what the meaning was. Although I may not have ever known that. No, I think I did. So I thought, well, I better use my own strategy with this. Inextricable. In means not, let's say. Could mean to, but let's say it means not. Extricable, associate with another word, extra. Not too extra. Nah, that doesn't make a word. What about extract? Not to extract. Ah, that makes a word. So inextricable probably means not to extract. And not to extract would mean it's inseparable. So that would be a very powerful, that's a kind of, like thermal. You have thermal and you think of, what is thermal? Thermometer. So it has to do with heat. Just like with mercurial. Mercurial is fast moving, So that's what I mean. You see a word like magnanimous, and that's a big sounding word. So it probably means something very big. Magnify comes from that, right? Magnificent. Okay, let's do a writing example. This appears also on the ACT, this type of thing. Which of the underlined portion has an error? Until the train stopped at the station, neither the engineer nor the conductor were aware that one of the passengers had become ill. Now, sometimes just the sound of it would tell you. But let's see if we can figure this out. Neither the engineer or the conductor, why is it was? Because if it was stated the engineer and the conductor, it would be were. And they both were. But he was or she was. So one of the passengers was. And that's how to do that one. One of the things that when you take an exam, you want to, again, I can't emphasize this more, you want to memorize, things, but you want to use strategies and memorize the strategy, so to speak. Like, again, every time you see an is, you put an equals. Every time you see an of, you put a times. A what, you put an x. You're using a strategy, but you're still memorizing. And I can't emphasize that more. Let's see if we should do another example. Let's do let's do this example. If x plus y is 7, this is going to be on the ACT or the SAT, and xy equals 4, find the value of x squared plus y squared. Now, let's take it from the curious mind, or the how somebody would do this if they don't want to rack their brains, or they're on a test. I mean, which is what you'll be on, right? How would I do this thing? I would square. I would try to get some, how do I get to x squared? Let's do this slowly. I'm in slow motion. Try to get the x squared plus y squared somehow. How do I get x squared plus y? Now, I got to be very careful when I say this to you. You want to take a chance, but a chance that looks like there's a possibility that the thing will work out. If I want to get x squared plus y squared, if I multiply x plus y equals 7 by itself, I'd end up with some x squared and a y squared in there. So that's taking a chance in a sense. So look at what I do. I try to connect. Connection is very important in math. Connect the x plus y with the x squared plus y squared. How do I do that? X plus y squared equals 7 squared. That's given. And that gives you x squared plus y squared plus 2xy equal 49. Now look at what I have. I have the x squared plus y squared. I have an 8 there, and I have a 9. I can figure out what x squared plus y squared is. You see how I did that? Because I know that xy equals 4, I can just substitute that in here, in the x squared plus y squared plus 2xy equals 49. Just substitute the xy equals 4 and get what x squared plus y squared is. Very, very powerful strategy. Let's go back to the line thing. Now, here's something that give this to like 20 people and see how many will get the answer to this. A rectangle is described in a quarter circle as shown below. The radius of the circle is 5. Find the diagonal of the rectangle as shown in the diagram. How would I do that? The radius is 5, but what is this line? I want to draw a line. What line would I draw? I draw that line. And by the way, let me go to the previous one. That line is the radius, and that's 5. Suppose we had a problem like this. The average scores of three boys was 70. The average score of 2 girls is 80. What's the average of all 5 boys? How would I do something like this? I mean, there are 2 averages here. What do I do? Okay, first strategy. You label the scores of the boys and girls. That's a simple one, right? A, B, and C. For girls, D and E. Now we can represent the average as A plus B plus C over 3 is 70. That's the average of the 3 boys being 70. D plus E over 2 is 80. That's the average of the 2 girls being 80. Now what do? A key thing in math is get rid of the fractions. Three times A plus B plus C over 3 equals 70 times 3, 210. 2 times D plus E over 2 is equal to 80 times 2 is 160. Cross off the 3's, of course. And now I use the third strategy. Add the equations. Very powerful strategy. With 2 equations, you can subtract, add, multiply, or divide them. The easiest thing, of course, to do is to add them. So the average, by adding the equations, the average becomes this. These are all in my books, so. In fact, by using strategies, you can solve a problem and learn how to solve that problem. You can use a strategy, and that strategy may be good for thousands of problems. So when you think of it, let's take the SAT or the ACT. Let's take the SAT, for example. Every question, additional question you get right, you get 10 more points. All right, approximately. Suppose you get 2 more questions right on the SAT because you were able to use a strategy for that. That's 20 points. Suppose you can use 20 strategies, and you can get, for each of those strategies, you get 2 questions here, 4 questions here, 5. You can get 400 points. So when somebody comes to me and says, by using your strategies, I got 400 points, and this has happened, to me, it's not that surprising. And again, a lot of these strategies are common sense. So it's not something that you have to mull over. I mean, drawing lines in a diagram, that's common sense. You want to complete something, so you want to complete the diagram. Let's go to, we did that one. That's a very good example, by the way. Oh, I think we've covered a lot of the, well, let's see. I'm wondering if we should cover any more of the strategies. I got to tell you this. When I was in, you could say, well, you may be smart or you may be bright, and that's why you can do it, but we can't do what you do. Let me tell you, when I got a 90 IQ on an IQ test in the 5th grade, and my father, who was a high school English teacher, had said, he was worried about it, and he gave me the exam to work out and to see if I could get a higher score on it. And I looked at the exam and I thought, okay, I'll just try to get a higher score on that. But then I thought, wait a minute, what's in this exam that's curious? Curiosity is a big word. I mean, that's a very important thing. What's curious that I, will do that, that I got such a low score? I mean, why did that happen? So I looked at the exam and I thought, oh, I could have used this to do that. I could have maybe used a strategy like this to use this. And, I was fascinated with the whole testing process. So I took the exam again a little later on. I got 120 and then I got 150. Later on. So, I mean, you can practice for this, but you can learn from this. And, the big question is a kid bright or is he not bright or is she not bright? I mean, is it what is really going on? Is it innate? A genius is something else. A genius, I think, has a mental. They can work really fast. The neurons or something. That's a little different. But somebody who's very bright can that person become very bright even though they may have been tested and very low? Even though you may say, oh, that person's not smart. And the thing is that you can actually learn these things. And, whether you have innate intelligence or not, I don't know whether you can even figure that out. But the fact is you can learn these things. And once you learn them, you start developing a curious nature. It's really a pity that little kids have a curiosity and an interest, and they can do something, and somehow something is thwarted, something is destroyed. Whereas they get older, they're constantly asking for acceptance, and they're constantly not looking at doing things themselves. And they're a lot of adults, unfortunately, will denigrate them. Will say, well, no, you don't do it this way. Do it this way. You can't really do this, or and that's unfortunate because if the kids would keep their curiosity going. See, if I've always had that, I've always challenged teachers. And interestingly enough, and maybe this is a big thing, and I thought of this recently, a teacher may want to feel authoritarian. I don't know. I'm not saying all, but, they may want to feel like they're the authority. And they impart this to the kids. And because of that, the kid is looking at the teacher for answering the questions and not doing their own thinking. I have always, because I haven't had a 90 IQ, and this is actually a very a godsend in a sense that this happened. Because I got a 90 IQ, I always felt I was a 90. I always felt I was not as smart as other people. And therefore, I never looked at myself as the authority or the know-it-all. I always looked at how can I help the other person, as I've helped myself in a sense. And this is a very, I think, a very critical thing on how I can always get excited about something. I got to tell you this, there's something classical about solving problems, about doing SAT or SAT problems. Uh, and that's in fact why I went into physics research later on. It's almost like music. There's certain types of music that you want to hear over and over again. In fact, that's what they call certain music classical. I was once I did a PBS seminar once, and this was training teachers, and there was quite a few school districts on this thing. This was a video thing, and I did a problem like robbery. This is when they had analogies on the SAT. Robbery is to thief, or something is to something else, and I thought to myself, I'm getting excited about this, but I've seen this question thousands of times, literally thousands of times. Why am I getting excited about this? I want to get to the teachers also. Well, maybe they can get excited the way I'm getting excited. Because there was something classical in solving that problem. Going through the process of solving that problem made me feel like there's something that's, it's almost like listening to a piece of music again. Something enjoyable. It's like it's hard to pinpoint this, but recapturing what is going on in solving that problem. So even when I'm doing these problems with you, I mean, I've seen these things so many times. Why would I even care about them? Why would I just sell books. What the heck? Why would I care about helping people or working with kids? You know, because there is something exciting about this. It's because I'm getting involved in the question again. And if you can get sort of like have this attitude of looking at a problem and seeing, oh, there's something curious or there's something interesting about this. I mean, I don't know if you want to go as far as I go. Like I can look at a sign outside, and if you could do this, boy, this is a one way to do very well on these exams, or a precursor to doing well on these exams. I can look at a street sign, and the street sign says a house number, says 724. So I look at 7 and 2 and 9 and 4 are 13. I add the digits up. 1 and 3 are 4. I add those digits up. The 4 is part of the 724. I was obsessive, and maybe that's part of the thing, getting obsessive in saying, why is there a 4 in the original number? I wonder how many numbers there are, and I went to calculate it. It took me 2 hours to do that, but I still went through the process of calculating that thing, figuring out what the probability was. Now, I'm not saying you should go that far, and I doubt if many people would go that far. Even scientists may not go that far at something like that. Although scientists might. But if you can get that interest or that curiosity, and what's going on with that. Let's see if there's another example here that we can do. We did that one. Let's see if there's Okay. Dr. Seuss, whose 44 books have sold more than 500 million copies, have made him probably the best-selling children's author in history. Now, sounds a little awkward. Dr. Seuss. Are we talking about Dr. Seuss? Are we talking about his books? What have made him? With Dr. How do you do something like this? Now look, because the comma placement we can see that the phrase whose 44 books have sold more than 500 million copies is like a parenthetical statement. You don't need that, whose 44 books have sold 500 copies. Take it out and see how that reads. Dr. Seuss have made him probably the best-selling author. That doesn't make sense. So you can see that have made him should be is. You see that? So that, now a lot of that, again, a lot of this is common sense. Let's go, let's see if there's a, oh, Carlos says, let me get this. Carlos says, could you do a probability question again? What is the weakest part? Well, Carlos, I assume by probability you have to realize is what is the definition of probability? It's favorable ways over total number of ways. Okay? So, I mean, if I have a coin and I want to flip it and see whether it lands on heads, what's the total ways it can land? Well, it can land heads or tails, right? The favorable ways is heads, if that's what you want. So it's 1 heads over 2 total ways, which is heads and tails. Now, let's do a probability question like this. Suppose there are 3, this is actually a question on a game show. Suppose I have 3 doors, okay? And there's a car behind one of the doors and a goat behind the other 2 doors. This is actually happening. This is on a game show. So again, a car behind one of the doors and a goat behind each of the other 2 doors. So I don't know, the doors are closed. So I have to, go to a door and open the door. So I go to a door. I don't open it yet. And then the host, this has happened on the game show. The host says, okay, I'm going to take out, you're with this door, with one particular door. I'm going to take out I'm going to open up one of the other doors and let's see what it is. And there, sure enough, there's a goat in the other door. So now the host says to me, do you want to stay with your door or do you want to switch doors? And most of the time, people stayed with the doors, which was a mistake. Because probability is, what happens is that there's a 1/3 chance of you getting the car. But once you eliminate the other door, there were only 2 doors. There's 1/3 chance of each door, right? So 2 of the other doors have a 2/3 chance. So if 2 of the other doors have a 2/3 chance, I would go to the other door. But I mean, probability is, you have to know that does that answer, I hope that answers your question, Carlos, with probability. Probability can be that's one of the hard parts of the SAT or the ACT is probability. But again, if you just know that it's favorable ways over total number of ways. Okay, so that's in fact there's a lot of games that actually deal with probability. That's just like that, which is kind of interesting. But let's look at it. Suppose you want to know, well, here I'm taking the SAT or the ACT, and what am I going to do that's what can I do that I can reduce my anxiety? And I want to mention this again. You want to learn basic skills code. That's first thing. What I mean by a basic skill is like 3 to the 4th times 3 to the third. You add the exponents, 3 to the seventh. Okay? You don't want to have to think about what to do with something like that. You want to memorize that. Okay? The sum of the angles in a triangle is the interior angles add up to 180 degrees. You want to memorize that. Don't think about trying to figure that out on the test. So all of even though you might have a thing on, like on the SAT, you have a thing which tells you this is what this is. Some of the angles of the triangles on 180 degrees. You don't want to reference anything like that. You want to know this code. Now, once you learn basic skills, once you know basic skills code, know that probability is favorable ways over total number of ways. Once you know that code, then you can go on to the strategies. And now, using the strategies together with the basic skills will enable you to go stepwise. This is very important. What I'm saying is extremely important. We'll go stepwise to a problem, and by going stepwise, you'll eventually get to the answer. It's almost like it's just a smooth curve getting to the answer. Instead of panicking about it, look, I was up in front of an audience once. I mention this in a lot of talks that I give because I think it's important. And I wanted to fire up the audience. So I said to the audience, this was a teacher, an audience, and this was particularly in math, and it was teachers in math. And I wanted to fire them up. It was like 5 or 6 o'clock at night, like your time, and they wanted to go home. They were taking this for credit probably, and they wanted to go home. So I looked at them and I said, I can take any question on the SAT or the ACT, and if it can be solved by a genius in a minute or less, I will solve that in a minute or less. So I thought that would fire, and the next thing I was going to say is the reason why I can do this is because I can do this through strategies. I didn't have a chance yet to even say that I could do it through strategies. Somebody, a young guy at the college board, I remember, gets up and says, okay, wise guy, I think he used the word wise guy. Okay, wise guy, I got a question for you. It's being field tested on a new SAT, and let's see if you can solve this thing. I was going to say, look, let me go on with the rest of the talk, but then I thought I better not do that. That's, defeating the purpose of what I just said before. So I said, okay. So the question was this, and these are the most difficult questions, these mixture problems. Coffee and espresso are mixed to give 50 pounds. A mixture of coffee is this, and all this goes on. Those are so difficult. In a panic, you think of taking a test as panicky. Can you imagine I'm standing up in front of almost 1,000 people or something in the audience, and I have to answer the question because of what I just said? So I thought, wait, do what you tell students. Do what you write in your books. Don't rush into the problem. He said, extract something from the problem and watch what happens psychologically. He said, coffee and espresso are mixed to give 50 pounds. I'm going to use that. C plus E equals 50. Watch what this did psychologically. This gave me the feeling of, wow, I have one equation because I knew basic skills. C plus E is 50. I have one equation in C and E. All I need to do, because I know basic skills, is get another equation, and then I'll be able to solve it. And that motivated me to find that other equation, and I was able to solve the problem. And I told him that. I said at first I wasn't panicked, but then I used my own strategies. Very important, thing to learn. So try to extract something from the problem that you can use, which will then lead you to the next step. By focusing on the answer, and by focusing on the panic of getting the answer, it's a very dangerous thing on the SAT and the ACT, or for that matter, any test. So you want to get that feeling of, how can I extract something out of the problem that will lead me to the next step, and I will trust that will lead me to the answer. This is what makes great scientists and journalists. They do not look at the bottom line answer. The problem with society today is we're looking for immediate result. We want an immediate fix with something. We watch television now and we don't interact. We want it to do for me. And unfortunately, we lose something out of it. We lose the real enjoyment out of the process of doing something. And so this is, I can't emphasize this more. So when you take the SAT and the ACT, or for that matter, any exam, first, again, I want to emphasize this again. Learn the basic skills first, then go on to the strategies. Then when you do practice on the test, I would like you to do get this so that you learn from your mistakes and see, oh, I could have used this strategy. Let me answer a question from ISIS that says, I'm sorry I'm not answering more questions here, but I want to really get this. Is it a good idea to take the SAT? Am I pronouncing your name right? I hope I am, ISIS. One time somebody wrote me, I'll answer your question. One time somebody wrote me a letter and it had something like Todd was the person's name, but somehow I read that as Toad. I don't know why. So I wrote a Dear Toad, and then of course I apologized to him later. But is it a good idea to take the SAT 2 times? I know many people who want to take it more than once so that they feel they are taking a real pretest than the actual SATs. Well, that's a two-stage question. Very good, excellent question. The reason why I say it's 2 stages. The first one is that when you do take the exam, if you're taking it for practice, make sure you get a copy of the exam back, and that's the question and answer disclosure service on the SAT, and I think there's a similar one with the ACT. So by getting the exam back, you'll be able to see what's going on. So again, if you take it 2 times and you're taking it for practice, that's what I would do. If you're taking it for 2 times because you want to get into the school and you want to see, whether to use them, whichever score is better, I would call the schools up. Do not rely on, something like what they say currently, like what the school does currently. I'd call the school up. If I were going to the school, if I wanted to get into the school, I'd call the school up and say, the counselor at the school or the administration, and say, how do you assess these, the applications? Can you take the exam 2 or 3 times? And if you do you average the scores? Do you take the highest score? That type of thing. Of course, if you take the highest score, you may as well take it thousands of times. So, because you can't take it thousands of times. But when you say taking a pre-SAT and then the actual SATs, I would first find out from the school how they do that. Now, if you can do it twice, you're not going to be penalized in any way, or they're not going to average the scores or something like that. When you take the pre-SAT, again, I would do it at a time where you can get the exam back. Just to take the exam is that's not a good idea. You're not learning from it. So I hope that answers your question, Isis. We're getting close to the end here, so I want to kind of wrap up with just to really get out straight the curiosity. If you can, it's not too late. As a matter of fact, it's never too late to do this. In fact, I created a book on brain teasers, which I get. Oh, in fact, let me tell you, I do this thing with Delta Airlines magazine once a month, where I do brain teasers, and you should see the emails I get with parents or kids saying, "Wow, I've worked on these problems on the plane, and it's so the trip goes by fast, but I'm learning something from solving the problem." That's the way you should look at things. You want to use an active approach. I didn't mention that before, really, but an active approach, not a passive approach. You want to actively learn. So if you see something curious, the way to do well on the SAT is to constantly be aware of things, constantly be curious about things. I'm riding in a car with other people, and suppose I don't have anything to say to them. Suppose, I, I'll look out the window and I might see a sign. I mean, this may be an extreme, but this is still an interesting thing. I see a sign, and I say, I wonder if a word was left out of that sign, whether I still can make a sentence out of it, or still make a meaningful, sentence, or figure out only one word that would fit in that thing, that sentence. That's a way of studying. You're actively studying for the SAT that way. In the reading, we didn't mention the reading, and I think this is very important. I want to mention this. Many people say, don't read the passage first. Look at the questions first before you read the passage. Because it looks like, oh, you'll kind of get the questions in your mind, and you'll know what questions to anticipate. You know what that happens, and they found that not only my own research, but the College Board research and other people's research finds out that almost 98%, 99% do poorly, worse on when they do that. They get a lower score when they do that than if they looked at the passage first. And of course, the question is why? Well, why? And in a sense, it's common sense. When you look at the questions first, you start panicking and saying, I got to memorize those questions. And reading the passage, you start losing intent of the passage. You always want to go back to those questions so that you don't get involved with the passage. And this is the key thing. You want to get involved with the reading passage. So if I see a passage that says, watch psychologically what happens with this. 500,000 years ago, I'm going to calculate that 500,000 years ago. That's 500 years. Okay? Now we're in the period from 2000 to minus 500. It's about 1500. Now we're in the 1500s. So now this launches me to want to read the rest of the passage. Oh, I'm in the 1500s. I know something now that I didn't know before. Let me go on to the rest of the passage. That gets you inspired to go on. So you want to read the passage and kind of like get the gist of it. If there's something in the passage that says Einstein doesn't believe that nature plays dice with the universe, underline it. What the heck does that mean? That's very curious. I'd be amazed if someone didn't ask a question, if a test writer did not ask a question based on what Einstein said with that. What does that mean? Einstein doesn't play dice with the universe. In other words, it would be, Carlos, this would be probability. He doesn't think that the universe is probabilistic. He thinks everything is exact. So this is what you want to, do. Melissa says, let's see if we can answer a few more questions here. Melissa says, I heard that it is bad to take both the ACT and the SAT because they are so different. Great question, Melissa. Yeah, they are so different. They are different, but they do involve the same strategies. And if you're more geared, I mean, that's why I wrote two books, the SAT and the ACT book on, for those particular subjects. But if you're more involved, if you're more like memory oriented, you want to like to memorize things, and you don't mind doing tedious math examples, rather than strategic ones or more thinking ones, so to speak, then take the ACT. The exams are getting closer and closer, I must say that. The SAT is more of a kind of game, strategy test. So that if you like to solve problems or you like puzzles, well, the SAT is probably better to take. So I wouldn't take both of them. I mean, I would take the one that you feel you're more comfortable with. Now, what are your books called? Nicole says. Let me get you that first. I hope you can see that first slide because they're called, it should be on the slide. The Gruber's Complete ACT Guide 2014, Gruber's Complete SAT Guide 2014. Those are the, the books that, and of course for the SAT, I would get, you know, those. The key book for the SAT of mine is the SAT Guide 2014. The ACT would be the ACT 2014. You can do the PSAT if you're in that, that's the precursor to the SAT, and of course the GRE is later. That's for graduate.